Hi, I'm Willie with H5 Technology. Welcome to my channel. Thank you for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. Tonight what we're going to do is we are going to install a UniFi controller on premise, so on our own hardware, from start to finish. We're not going to do an SSL certificate. You can go watch the SSL certificate if you want to see that, but we are going to do some DNS, and we're actually going to use our Synology for this. So when you install on premise, you can install a couple different ways. You can have a physical piece of hardware. You can download the ISO, burn the ISO to a disk, boot from a disk, or boot from a USB key, or you can virtualize it. And we are going to virtualize it. And whether you're running Zen or Citrix or VMware or Hyper-V, you can do this. We just happen to have a Synology here, so we are going to install the virtualization software for Synology and run ours on top of one of our Synology boxes. So you're going to need that. You're going to need putty, so you can get into the box, and then you're also going to need to be able to download, of course, Ubuntu, UniFi, and all that. So what we're going to do is we are going to first go over to our disk station. Now, this is not the disk station that you are used to seeing in the videos. This is a different disk station. This was my personal disk station. And what we are going to do is we're going to go into the package center, and we are going to look for, we're just going to type the word virtual, and we are going to install right here the virtual machine manager. So we're going to go ahead and install that. And while that's installing, we're going to come over to the Ubuntu website, www.ubuntu.com, and we're going to download server 64-bit, but we're not going to download the newest release, which is 18. We're going to download 16. So we're going to go to downloads, and we're going to go to server. You can get to this a couple different ways, but then we're going to go to alternative downloads, and we're going to go down here, and we're going to go to past releases, other flavors, click past releases. We're going to click on 16.04.4. and then we are going to download the 64-bit server image. So you can see that guy's about 848 megs, so we're going to go ahead and let it download. While that's downloading, we're going to hop over here to our Synology. It looks like our virtual machine manager was installed, so we'll bring that up. Now, virtual machine manager is awesome. You can create clusters out of Synology servers and do high availability and all kinds of stuff. They give you a full-featured virtualization platform. So we're setting this up, so we're just going to run it on volume 1, and we're going to leave these settings for now. The previously disabled network settings will be, yeah, that's fine. Well, it's talking about the Open vSwitch, so it's going to enable the virtual switch and go through all that. It looks like we are about 50% done with our Ubuntu download, which is nice. That means it's going quickly. And right now, the version of the Ubiquity UniFi software, we're going to grab it from the Ubiquity download. It is going to be version 5. We'll do 5.7.23. Alright, it says the virtualization cluster has been created successfully. You can now start creating your first virtual machine. And yeah, we'll join the beta. What the heck. And then once this is done, we'll go ahead and click finish. And so now we have one host, 0 virtual machines. We have healthy storage. Down here is all of our RAM, our LAN status. And I'm going to do an entire video on the virtual machine manager for Synology, so we're just going to kind of get to the steps that we need to work on here tonight. Now, the next thing we need to do is, it looks like our ISO is done downloading. Yep, completed. So what we've got to do now, we're going to pull up the file station, and we are going to go ahead and upload our Ubuntu. And when we upload a file, we can either do skip, so if the file already exists, it'll skip it, or we can overwrite if it already exists. So we're going to go ahead and upload the file. So I selected my file and it went to the queue, and over here you can see it is now currently uploading that ISO to the Synology. And so then you see right here this 1604, this is the one we're going to use. So we're going to go back over to our virtual machine manager. We're going to click on virtual machine. We're going to go create. It's going to ask us which operating system we're going to run. It's going to be Linux. We're going to use our storage that's built into the Synology. We're going to call this UniFi. It's going to have 1 CPU, and we'll give it 2 gigs of memory. Should be more than enough. ISO. So now this is where we're going to browse and go to our ISO. So now we're going to get the 1604, and we'll give it a 32 gig disk. You can choose your different. You can choose the different controllers, ID, SATA, or the virt.io. So we're going to leave that virt.io on there. We're going to go next. Default network is going to be the, so this has 2 NICs, but we are only using 1 at the moment. And then it also asks us what model do we want to use for the network adapter for our installation. So we can use the Vertio, or we can do the Intel, I think that's Intel E1000. This is, I think, a real take. We'll try the E1000. It usually works pretty well. Auto start, no. BIOS legacy is fine. We'll just leave all this at default. Click next. WHOW needs to be able to manage the box, and we're going to go ahead and power it on after creation. Now it's going to go ahead and create the VM, and then it's going to power it up. So then what we're going to do is once it comes online, we are going to click on that, and we're going to click connect. It's going to open another window, and here we are able to, I hit enter there, we are here going to install our Ubuntu server. So strap in. This could be as exciting as watching paint dry. I'm going to select English, United States, detect keyboard layout, sure. Press any of these keys. No, no, no. No, it would have been easier for me to just select the English keyboard. It's trying to guess the keyboard layout, and it is the US keyboard layout. So we'll go ahead and continue through that. That was totally unnecessary in about a 20-second time suck there. So you can see that the Synology handles this Ubuntu install like a champ. And this install shouldn't take a whole lot of time, but I think what I'll do is I'll pause the video until this gets to something where it's actually going to prompt us, and then I'll bring it back online and we'll go from there. So we'll be right back. Alright, so it wants to know a host name for our server. So this is hosted on Synology, so we'll call this UniFi. Now this is the actual underlying operating system host name. And it's going to come up and it's going to ask us what's the full name for the user. It's Willie Howe. Now it's going to ask us what our username is going to be. So we're going to type in our super secret password. And I'm not going to have anything really in the home directory besides the different distributions, the different versions of UniFi that I'm going to install. Got our time zone correct. Chicago does it based on IP geolocation. And I think we're going to be out of pausing. Oh, okay. So here you can do a couple things. You can set up an encrypted logical volume, or you can just use the entire disk, or do a logical, set up LVM, the logical volume manager. And we're just going to do guided use entire disk. You can play around with this. Back in the old days with Linux, you actually had to create your partitions. Now you can still do that if you go manual, but these installations have just made me far too lazy to want to do that, and they do a pretty good job. So it found our drive, and it shows us that it's a 34.4 gig Synology iSCSI storage. We'll go ahead and hit enter on that. That is the drive that we want it to automatically partition. Here are the partitions it is going to create. Do we want to write the changes to the disk? Yes, we do. Now, in your case, you may want a larger than a 32 gig if you're virtualizing. If it's a physical server, you're probably going to have a larger drive than that. You may not. Maybe you're setting it up. Maybe you're booting to flash or something. I don't know. But this installation is going to work the same whether it is virtualized or whether it's physical. It's just going to see different hardware. So we're going to pause this and we'll be right back. All right, so it's asking us for proxy information. If you have to have proxy information, make sure you fill this out. We do not have to have proxy information, so we're going to go and enter through that, and now it is going to go ahead and configure a little bit more, and we'll have some more questions here in a minute. All right, so the next question that it's asking us is, how do we want to manage updates to the system? Now we can tell it to go ahead and do no automatic updates. We can tell it to do install security updates automatically, or we can manage the system with landscape. And landscape is Ubuntu's parent company's Linux management platform, where you can put all of your Ubuntu desktops, servers, everything in this single pane of glass for management, and push updates and manage all the systems. I wish I had it. I can't cost justify it. It might be free now. The last time I looked at it, you had to pay for it. But we're going to go ahead and tell it to do no automatic updates, and we will add this to our calendar to log in and do those updates. So now the next thing that's going to come up is, what are we going to use this server for? We are literally going to leave the standard system utilities. We're going to come down, we're going to press the space bar and open SSH server, and we are going to hit continue. That's it. That's all we want on this box for now. So now it's going to do its thing a little bit, and we'll be back. Alright, so the installation is at a point where it wants to write the grub bootloader to the hard drive, and it wants to know, do we want to install the bootloader to the master boot record? And we are going to select yes, and it's going to run through and it's going to do this. Now this entire installation has only taken, it's taken so far probably less than 10 minutes. So it's going to go ahead and it's going to finish this, and we'll be right back. So while this is finishing up, you can actually switch back to your Synology, and you can see that that virtual machine is using about 26% of the CPU and about 2 gigs of memory. So I could, I've got 4 more gigs of RAM for this I need to put in, but we come back, our installation is done, so we're going to go ahead and let it reboot. We're going to hit enter. It's going to do just a little bit more cleanup, and then it's going to go ahead and reboot the virtual machine, and then we are going to have a working Ubuntu machine. So there it is. So we're going to go ahead and let it boot here real quick, and we're going to log into the machine. We're going to get the IP address. We're going to make sure that our networking works. And then we are actually going to set a static IP on this machine. So we're going to enter the credentials that we set up during the installation. And there's already some updates that can be done, but we're going to do ifconfig. And it grabbed a DHCP address of 66.189. Now, you're going to want to note what this name is, this interface name, because you will need that when we set the static IP. So it's ENS3, but let's make sure we can ping 66.1, and we can. And I don't think there's anything on 66.4. So we'll make this box 66.4. So we're going to go CD, etc., or Etsy, network, is it network or networking? Network, do an LS, and then if we do a more interfaces, we're going to see this here. So we're going to do a sudo nano interfaces. It's going to ask us for our password. We're going to go in here, and this is where we are going to change things. So instead of being DHCP on this line, we're going to make that static. Then we're going to come down to the next line, do address as a 192.168.66.4. Net mask is going to be 255.255.255.0. The gateway is going to be 192.168.66.1, and our DNS name servers, we're going to do 192.168. The Synology is 66.7, because that is the next thing that we're going to do after this. We're going to do a sudo if down ENS3. sudo if up ens3, do an if config. This is what we'll do here real quick. We'll do a sudo shutdown. We'll just reboot it real quick. And when it comes back, it should have that static IP address that we just put on interface ENS3. And we'll know that here in just a second. So make sure that you set a static IP. You do not want the IP address, especially if you're going to have multiple sites and people coming in through your firewall. You don't want the IP address of this thing changing. It's gonna wreak havoc. So we're logged in, and there it is. Now we've got our static IP, and now nothing's gonna happen yet because it can't resolve any DNS. So now we need to go set up DNS on the Synology. So we're gonna come back over here. We're gonna go to Package Manager. We're gonna go to DNS, and we'll install the DNS server. Okay, so we have our Ubuntu install taken care of. We installed the DNS server, so we're going to go ahead and open DNS on this. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over to resolution, and we're going to enable resolution, and then we're going to have forwarders on there, and we're going to forward to 1.1.1.1, and we'll apply that. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to hop back over here, and we're going to do a sudo apt-get update, and it's going to ask us for our password, and we're going to put that in. And we are resolving DNS, which is excellent because we set that name server over to the Synology box, and we did that in the interfaces with the DNS name server. So we'll go ahead and do an upgrade, and it's going to grab 101 megabytes of archives, and then it's going to use 29 megs of space. So while that is doing its upgrade, we're going to hop back over here. We're going to go to zones. We are going to create a master zone. It is going to be a forward zone. And the difference between a forward and a reverse zone, I explained this kind of in the last video, but a forward zone maps names to IPs, and a reverse zone maps IPs to names. And if you're not familiar with reverse DNS, if you've ever run an email server, you will quickly get intimately familiar with reverse DNS. So here we're going to call this H5LLC. No, we're not going to use H5LLC. We will use, we'll use, for demonstrations, we'll use h5llc.com. 66.7 will be the master there. Now, of course, this is internal only, so we're going to click OK there. Now, the next step to this that I am not going to do because I have real things running on H5LLC, but whatever domain you use, you need to go out to your DNS, and you're going to point towards whatever IP address you're going to forward the ports through to your UniFi. So we'll kind of go over that here in just a minute. We're going to click OK. Now we've got our h5llc.com, so we're going to edit, we're going to do a resource record, we're going to create an A-type record, and we're just going to call it UniFi. And it's going to be 192.168.66.4. We hop back over there. Our Ubuntu is still upgrading. We're going to click OK. So now we have our unify.h5llc.com. We'll click Finish there. Now, if you have a static IP address or if you have a dynamic IP address, so if you have a dynamic IP address, you can create, dynamic DNS on your router, and then you can forward the ports through your router. So I'm going to hop into my router real quick, and we're going to look at that. All right, so we're logged into our router, and we would go in and we could do a simple port forwarding for this, because if you're hosting a UniFi controller, you're likely going to have clients all over. They're going to be on different IP spaces, different providers. So unless you're going to do a lot of crazy management of this, you're better off to just do a port forward, right? So we're going to go to port forward. You can enable hairpin NAT, but that's not needed since you're running a split DNS. But we do have to add a LAN interface. So for us, it would be BR0, and then our WAN interface is of course ETH0. Our port forwarding rules, we would do 8080, and that would be TCP, and it'd be 192.168.66.4, and it's going to be 8080, and this is going to be UniFi inform. And so on and so forth. The stun port is 3478, I believe, and that is UDP. So these 3 ports will get you up and going. Now, if you have a client who's going to do captive portal, there are some other ports that you're going to need to open, but these 3 will get you up and going. You can do a Google search for UniFi ports, and they will list all the port numbers you need. However, it is very important to note that when they list the UniFi ports, they list the MongoDB port. Do not do a port forward. I repeat, do not do a port forward to the MongoDB port. Do not do it. That exposes your database unnecessarily to the internet. Do not port forward the MongoDB database. I don't know if I can stress that enough. Do not do it. Alright, so all of our port forwarding is set up. So if we had our DNS address on the outside setup coming to the IP address of the router here, now we're going to be in good shape and people are going to get to us from the outside. Now, on the inside of our network, what we want to do is I like to use layer 3 adoption with UniFi, and I believe you should be using fully qualified domain names if you can. Now, small site, 1 or 2 pieces of hardware, IP address, going to be just fine. But if you're looking at this from a managed services standpoint, from an enterprise standpoint, from consulting standpoint, use FQDNs. It's going to be a lot cleaner for you and a lot easier in the long run, and you're going to have more than 2 devices if you're doing this as a managed service. So we're going to come in and we are going to look at the details of our DHCP. Right now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the DNS to 66.7, which is our Synology. But then the other thing we're going to do is we're going to add in the domain. So that's going to set the domain. I don't like using this UniFi controller option because right now it's IP address only, and I don't like that. So layer 3, what's going to happen is at layer 3 on your devices, when you plug them in, they're going to look for a record from their DNS server called UniFi, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to set our default domain in DHCP so that they're going to search the h5llc.com domain first, and they're going to look for that UniFi resource record. And I'm going to show you, once we get through this, how that's going to work. And you can do this at a client site by setting the default domain for the DHCP that's handed out to those devices to the domain of your, where your UniFi is. So we're going to get to that here in just a second. So we made these changes. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. I'm going to open a command prompt, and I'm going to do a renew to go ahead and pull those new settings in. So we're going to let that go, and you can see now I have connection specific DNS suffix of h5llc.com. So if I just type in ping UniFi, look at that. It automatically puts the domain suffix on, right? So you see where we're going with this? So now when a device just says, hey, where's UniFi, it's already got the h5llc as the suffix, so it's automatically going to be able to pick that up. And I'm going to show you how that's going to come into play here in just a minute. So it looks like our UniFi box is done. our DNS is done. That's good. So now the next thing to do is to open up putty, and we're going to SSH into our controller and get the software installed. Another thing you'll notice is I pin things to my taskbar, things that I use often, and putty is one of those things. So we're going to go 192.168.66.4, and it's going to come up. It's going to ask us to verify the SSH key. We're going to say yes, and now we're in. So the next thing that we're going to do is, what I always do is I always make a separate directory for the current version of UniFi that I'm downloading and using, and I do that so that if for some reason I have to roll back, I have that old copy of UniFi hanging around, because you never know when they're going to remove the software or who's going to have it available. So it's a little bit of a fail-safe. It takes us 5 seconds to create that, and if, like I said, if you have to roll back, then you've got an old version of the software. So over here we know that we're going to be on 5.7.23. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a 5.7.23 folder, and then I'm going to go into that folder, and I am going to grab the download link for Debian Ubuntu. Yes, we accept the terms. We're going to copy that URL, and now we're going to do a wget and paste the URL in. It's going to go out. It's going to download the UniFi software. Now we're going to do a sudo dpackage space -i UniFi. It's going to ask for that super secret password again. We're going to put it in. Now, it's going to go through and it's going to give us an error about dependencies. And we are going to fix that with no trouble at all here in just a second. So now we're going to do a sudo apt-get -f install. Now, I always manually download the deb file and install it because I like to have that fine-grained control over the upgrade process. I can upgrade my underlying operating system without upgrading UniFi. Now, you could do that if you're using the repository, but this way is much cleaner. So we're going to grab 90 megabytes worth of files and get those installed. And what we're going to do here is it's going to go through its thing. Once it has satisfied those requirements, it is going to go ahead and install UniFi and start UniFi. So that's what it is working on right now. Alright, so our upgrade is done, but to really drive home the fact what I'm talking about with the layer 3 adoption, what I've done is, or what we're going to do is, we're going to go into the edge router and we are going to change VLAN 2. So everybody knows that if you're on the same layer 2 or the same network as UniFi, that the devices will just be discovered. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go to a different VLAN. We're going to configure it just like we did the VLAN 1, and then we're going to plug an access point in once we configure UniFi, and you're going to get to see that through the power of the layer 3 discovery that it shows up for adoption, and that's how it'll work for your sites too. So let's hop back over to our edge router. Now here is the DHCP pool for VLAN 2. So what I'm going to do is I changed the DNS to 66.4, and I changed the and that should be 66.7. You all caught me and you were paying attention. And then the domain is h5llc.com. So we are going to go ahead and we are going to save that. And now we are going to hop over to our UniFi, and we are going to go ahead and configure the software. Alright, so since we don't have an SSL certificate, we get the insecure message. So we're going to go ahead and go past that. We're going to go ahead and we are going to configure now our UniFi server from scratch. So we're going to go next, and you can see that this UniFi mesh was on the same network. So we're not going to mess with that because it's not on that network anymore. I did have it plugged in, so we're going to ignore that. We're going to go next. We're going to set up a secure SSID. This is going to be UniFi from scratch. And that is just let me in now. And it will enable guest access and UniFi from scratch guest. Next, we're going to fill all this out. And my password is so-so, and it's not going to let me it's not going to let me proceed until we have what it considers to be a good password. So we'll finish that. We're going to skip registering this with the Ubiquity cloud. And now we are presented with our login screen. So we're going to go ahead and log in. There's no devices. There's really not a pending device. And there's really, it does see the other switch on the network. But this guy is not really pending adoption because he is not plugged in. He is right here because I factory defaulted him. I set the antennas just messing around. But what I did do is I did change the network that this is going to be on once it gets powered up. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to plug this guy in. And I'm going to set him here, and I don't know if you can see. Yep, you can see the LED on that. So we're going to let this thing boot up. That should start blinking white here in a second. And we're going to let it boot up, and we're going to let it get an IP address on that 69 network. And because it takes that default domain of h5llc.com, it should show up under our UniFi controller with the with a 69 IP address and be ready to be adopted. So we will I didn't even have to click refresh. So this thing came up quick. So 192.168.69.4, and you can see that our controller is actually in the 66. We'll come over here. We'll go over to VPN, come back over here. We'll view leases. Let's see, and you can see 192.168.69.4, and it doesn't have a host name, but that is the power of layer 3 adoption when you get it set up correctly. So your devices just call home. They call home to your controller, and you are good to go. So we'll hop back over to UniFi. We'll go ahead and adopt this guy. So his light's going to start blinking away here. And while he's provisioning and adopting, we can do a couple things here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to just we're going to rename the default site to we'll just, I mean, I don't want to do anything too crazy, but we'll just call it first site. That sounds good to me. Apply those changes, and then you can come in here and start adding your sites. You can start having customer equipment call in. You can see that that guy is blue now, and he is provisioning. I always get, they should just, for Willie Howe, turn that refresh button on automatically. It used to be there automatically, but he's provisioning, and we can give this a name, first mesh, and then we could go about following my best practices guide for setting up your UniFi controller. You could go back and view the video for setting up an SSL certificate, and you are going to have a fantastic UniFi controller. So that's it. That's this video. I hope you Really enjoyed it. I enjoyed making it. It was fantastic. So if you did like the video, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe, please comment and share. Please follow me on Twitter and Instagram. If you need consulting, network security, voice over IP, go down and go to the link h5llc.com and fill out the contact form, and somebody will get in touch with you as soon as possible. We have a Discord channel where you can come ask questions and hang out with the crew. Charlie's our admin and he's great. That link's down there. We also have an Amazon shop where you can buy all the products that you see featured here on the channel. Once again, I really appreciate you being here, and as always, we'll see you in the next video.